I've auditioned for a lot, and haven't got a lot. And then Grant Torino came around, where he was talking to me, was like this little role. Imagine auditioning for every single one of your father's movies and getting rejected every time. That's Scott Eastwood's reality. Even when Clint directed American Sniper, Scott didn't get the call. While his father won Academy Awards, Scott parked cars and mixed drinks to survive. He made more money bartending than acting by 35. He was so burned by Hollywood that he considered becoming a firefighter. But the most shocking part isn't his career struggles. It's what happened when he finally stood up to his father on March 21st, 1986. Scott Clinton Reeves came into the world in Monterey, California. His birth wasn't announced in headlines. It wasn't even openly acknowledged by his own father, Clint Eastwood, at the time. Clint was already a household name, directing and starring in hits like Pale Rider. But while he stood tall on red carpets, Scott's life was quietly beginning in the shadows of a scandal. His mother, Jocelyn Reeves, worked as a flight attendant. She had met Clint during one of his many trips in the mid-1980s. What followed was a secret affair that lasted at least 3 years. Years during which Clint was publicly involved with another woman actress, Sandra Locke. Locke had no idea. He was living a double life. She believed they were exclusive and only found out about Scott and his younger sister, Catherine, during a bitter lawsuit years later. When Scott was born, his birth certificate didn't carry the Eastwood name. He was listed as Scott Clinton Reeves, a quiet attempt to keep the affair under wraps. Catherine was born in 1988. By that time, the secret had stretched far enough that the truth couldn't be hidden forever. But Clint didn't acknowledge them publicly, and he certainly didn't raise them. Scott spent his early years in the quiet town of Carmel-by-the-Sea, where Clint had once served as mayor. Yet the boy growing up there didn't live a celebrity life. His father might have been pulling in $15 million per film during the 90s. But Scott's world looked very different. When he was 10, Jocelyn moved them to Hawaii. It wasn't just a change of scenery. It was an attempt to place thousands of miles between Scott and the Eastwood spotlight. There, in modest surroundings, Scott lived a life his classmates never questioned. They didn't know he had a Hollywood father, and Clint, for the most part, stayed out of sight and out of reach. While Clint expanded his fortune with blockbuster films and new properties, Scott got by on Jocelyn's flight attendant salary. He worked construction jobs as a teenager. He waited tables. When he went to college at Loyola Marymount University, it wasn't with the help of a trust fund. He paid his own way. Even while studying for a communications degree, he took acting classes, auditioned for bit parts, and kept using his birth name, Scott Reeves. He didn't want special treatment. He didn't want Clint's help, but the rejection came anyway. Scott later admitted that he auditioned for nearly every one of his father's films and was turned down each time Clint refused to help. He didn't even cast Scott in major roles. Even when he directed American Sniper, a film that grossed more than $547 million and earned 6 Oscar nominations, Scott wanted just one shot. He didn't get it. Clint's philosophy was simple. No handouts. No favors. You earn it yourself. That might sound admirable, but for Scott, it meant years of working low-budget films, parking cars, and building houses, while his father won Academy Awards. His earliest roles were almost invisible in flags of Our Fathers. 2006, directed by Clint, Scott had a tiny role as Private. Roberto Lunsford, he was credited under the name Scott Reeves. No one knew he was Clint's son. He wanted it that way, but the cost was high. He missed the attention, the headlines, the momentum in films like Pride and Player 5150. He was lost in the credits. These weren't just indie films. Some went straight to video. Others didn't play beyond a handful of theaters. He was stuck in a professional no man's land, working hard but getting nowhere. His family situation wasn't much easier. Clint Eastwood had 8 children with 6 different women. Scott was just one piece of that puzzle. His half-siblings included Laurie, born in 1954 and given up for adoption. Kimber, born in 1964 to a stunt woman, Kyle and Allison, born during Clint's marriage to Maggie Johnson. Francesca, born in 1993 with actress Frances Fisher, and Morgan, born in 1996 to news anchor Dina Ruiz. Some of these children grew up in wealth. Others, like Scott and Catherine, did not. Some didn't meet each other until adulthood. Family gatherings where awkward resentment simmered beneath the surface. During his teenage years in Hawaii, Scott struggled. He acted out. He was suspended for fighting. He had what he later called anger issues. He knew who his father was, but couldn't talk about. Couldn't ask why he was absent. Couldn't explain to anyone why he felt both important and invisible when they returned to California in 2000. He enrolled in Carmel High. Slowly, the truth began to leak out. Some classmates treated him like royalty. Others mocked him. He considered keeping the name Reeves forever, just to escape the comparisons. By college, he was done hiding, but he still refused to rely on Clint's power. He applied for financial aid. He worked long hours. He auditioned for roles that paid next to nothing. And then something began to shift in 2009. Scott landed a role in Invictus. It was another Clint Eastwood film. But this time, Scott used his real last name. The film was about proving yourself under pressure. It was about fighting to be taken seriously, and that's exactly what Scott was doing at just 26. Scott Eastwood took a massive risk. He signed a contract for not 1, but 3 horror films. His role in Texas Chainsaw 3D would have locked him into a trilogy, and nobody even knew his real name. He was still going by Scott Reeves to avoid being labeled as Clint Eastwood's son. Filming happened in Shreveport, Louisiana, back in August 2011. Scott hadn't even seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The only version he'd watched was the Jessica Biel remake, and yet he stepped into one of horror's most iconic franchises. That movie became the 7th installment and was pitched as a direct sequel to the original 1974 film. Then came a huge turning point just a year later in 2014. Scott joined Fury, a gritty World War II film starring Brad Pitt. This wasn't just a minor role. He played Sergeant Miles, the tank crew's newest soldier. The cast won the National Board of Review's Best Ensemble Award. That meant Eastwood, still trying to prove he wasn't riding on a famous last name, was now standing shoulder to shoulder with Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, and Jon Bernthal. It was official industry recognition, and it wasn't just for showing up. Scott had to go through intense military training and operate real Sherman tanks from the 1940s. This was raw, physical, emotional work, but it paid off for the first time. Critics started calling him a real actor, not just Clint's kid a year later in 2015. Scott took another unexpected leap, this time into romance. He starred in The Longest Ride, a Nicholas Sparks film, where he played a bull rider who falls in love. It was classic Sparks, slow burns, big emotions, and impossible choices. But here's what's wild. Scott did his own bull riding stunts. That was during a year filled with Marvel stars and major blockbusters. Still, Scott pulled ahead. He even got nominated for Choice Movie Breakout Star Studios, now saw him differently, and just when people thought they had him figured out, Scott shocked everyone again. Later that same year, he popped up in Taylor Swift's Wildest Dreams music video. Not just a cameo. He played the lead romantic interest in a dreamy 1950s set African film within a film directed by Joseph Kahn. It was one of Swift's most sensual and cinematic videos. The steamy scenes were unexpected, and so was the backlash. People in the industry warned him not to do it. They said it might kill his credibility as a serious actor, but Scott went for it. Anyway, the video launched during the MTV VMAs pre-show on August 31, 2015. Within hours, it had millions of views. It also came with a twist. All proceeds went to wild animal conservation. Meanwhile, Scott Eastwood kept a heartbreaking secret for almost 3 years in 2017, during an interview with GQ Australia. He finally revealed the truth back in 2014. His girlfriend, Jewel Brangman, had died in a car accident. She was only 26. The crash wasn't serious. It was the kind of accident most people walk away from. But Jewel didn't. She died instantly, and Scott never talked about it. Not to the public, not even to her family. He stayed silent until that one interview. Jewel was driving from San Diego to Los Angeles in a 2001 Honda Civic she had rented on the way. She lightly rear-ended another vehicle in a small chain reaction crash. Nothing looked deadly. No one else involved had serious injuries. But Jewel's car had a dangerous secret. The airbag inside had been recalled in 2009. The rental company never fixed it when the airbag deployed. It didn't save her. It killed her. The chemicals inside had become unstable. The metal canister exploded. A piece of shrapnel ripped through her neck. Scott said it was so violent, it split her spine. That was the only injury. One piece of flying metal took her life. The airbag came from Takata. Their airbags were found in 24 million cars across the US. It became the biggest automotive recall in American history. But for Jewel, that recall was too late. She was part of the fallout. Her father, Alexander Brangman, was crushed. He had moved across the country to be closer to his daughter. She was his only child. She was his best friend. The last Father's Day card she gave him said she'd always be his little girl. 3 months later, she was gone. Scott was devastated. He said he'd lost friends before, but never someone he loved like that. He had never faced the loss of a partner that changed him. He said it made dating harder. It made trusting people harder. For years. He didn't even tell Jewel's father. In 2017, he admitted, "I still haven't found the right words." Jewel's father had begged for answers. He wanted the world to know how much she was loved, but Scott stayed silent, and when he finally spoke, it was clear. He wasn't healed. He was still broken. Scott's pain wasn't just from the accident. It was from what he didn't do. He never reached out, never called. He carried that guilt. And when he finally opened up, it wasn't just about grief. It was about shame, survivors, guilt, fear, emotional paralysis. He didn't know how to face a father who had lost everything. But before all that, before the heartbreak, Scott Eastwood had another kind of mentor, Paul Walker. The Fast and Furious star wasn't just a co-worker. He was a friend. A guy, a big brother, and he introduced Scott to something that would later help him survive emotionally, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Paul brought Scott into the sport around 2007 for Paul. It wasn't just exercise. It was a way of life. He trained under top names like Ricardo Franjinha Miller and Ron Shiraki. He even turned parts of his Hawaii home into a training center. That's how much he loved it. Paul was already a brown belt when he died in 2013. He had planned to get his black belt soon. He never made it, but 2 weeks after his death, his instructors awarded it to him posthumously. Scott took Paul's gift seriously. He didn't just train casually, he embraced it. He said it taught him how to control his ego, how to stay humble, and how to manage pain, both physical and emotional. "You'll choke some people out," he said, And some will choke you out, no matter who you are. That was the lesson. No fame, no muscles, no Hollywood last name could protect you on the mat. You had to earn every inch. For someone like Scott, growing up in the shadow of Clint Eastwood, this was essential. He needed something that stripped away the expectations jiu-jitsu did, that it taught him to respect his limits. It gave him a space to fail safely. It became part of his identity. Joe Rogan once explained why jiu-jitsu is so powerful for men. He said it gives them a way to release built-up emotion, a way to stop pretending, a way to face fear and anger without violence. It humbles you. It calms you down. That's exactly what it did for Scott. After Jules' death, jiu-jitsu wasn't just exercise anymore. It became therapy. Scott said it helped him stay grounded, helped him keep going. He practiced regularly, showed up, even when he didn't want to. The discipline gave him strength, not just for his body, but for his mind in a strange way. Paul Walker's saved Scott Eastwood twice. Once by introducing him to the sport, and again by giving him the tools to survive after Jewel Paul's death was a tragedy. But his impact lived on. Scott carried that with him. Every time he stepped on the mat, he honored his friend. Every time he got back up, he honored Jewel Scott. Eastwood didn't just want to be another actor riding on his father's legacy. He wanted to carve his own path. That path exploded open in 2017 when he joined one of the biggest franchises in the world, The Fast and the Furious. He played a sharp-suited government agent called Little Nobody. The role was written to fill the void left by Paul Walker. Eastwood didn't try to copy him, instead. He brought his own charm, wit, and steel. The character had the same sense of honor, loved fast cars, and clashed with the crew just enough to earn respect. With over $6 billion already earned worldwide, the franchise gave Eastwood instant global visibility, and it wasn't just a cameo. He helped track down Charlize Theron's villain cipher, proving he could handle big action and big stars. But it wasn't a one-off. In 2018, Eastwood went even bigger. He co-led Pacific Rim Uprising, stepping into the giant shoes of the original film's legacy. The movie had robots, monsters, explosions, and Eastwood in the thick of it, though critics weren't blown away. The film still earned $291 million, and Eastwood, he stood tall through green screen CGI and physical stunts. It was a test of whether he could carry a global blockbuster, and he didn't crack. Then, in 2019, he switched gears. The Outpost wasn't loud or flashy. It was raw, intense, and painfully real. Eastwood played a soldier trapped in one of the most dangerous battles of the Afghanistan War. It wasn't a heroic fantasy. It was messy, terrifying, and emotional. The critics loved it. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 93%. Veterans said it felt real. One critic even said Eastwood sounded exactly like a young Clint when he muttered the line, "No, not today." This time he didn't just prove he could fight. He proved he could act by 2023. He was back in Fast X. Fans had missed him in F9. But now he returned in full force. With Mr. Nobody gone, Little Nobody stepped up. The cast was stacked. Vin Diesel, Jason Momoa, Brie Larson, but Eastwood held his own. The movie set up future stories, hinting that Eastwood's character would become even more important in a franchise that constantly reinvents itself. He stayed relevant and valuable in 2025. He made his biggest leap yet. Alarum wasn't just another action flick. It was a 95-minute showdown with Sylvester Stallone, directed by Michael Polish and released by Lionsgate. The story followed two ex-spies trying to live in peace. A plane crash, a mysterious hard drive, and a deadly chase bring them back into the chaos. Stallone brought the grit, Eastwood brought the fire. The director said watching them together was like a master class, and Eastwood didn't just survive the scene. He matched Stallone move for move. It wasn't just a movie. It felt like the torch was being passed from one generation of action legends to the next. While the cameras rolled, Eastwood was building something else to Made Here. Launched with entrepreneur Dane Chapin in 2019. This wasn't just another celebrity clothing brand. It was a patriotic mission. Eastwood believed American-made should still mean something. Their company started with basics: t-shirts, socks, boxers, all made in US factories. Not outsourced, not cheap. Real, American hands behind every thread, he said. It's the hard-working folks across the country that make our brand possible. And he meant it. Eastwood wasn't just a spokesperson. He and Chapin were hands-on down to the fit of every shirt. The idea was simple but bold. Make everyday essentials with high quality and tell the story of the workers who made them. Each product was a symbol, proof that American manufacturing wasn't dead. It just needed someone to believe in it again. The brand. Soft launched in September 2019. Their website offered early discounts to supporters, but behind the scenes, it was hard. They had to redo designs, refine materials, and find suppliers who shared their vision. Most of these products were usually made overseas. Eastwood was determined to prove they could do it better, right at home. It wasn't about chasing fashion trends. It was about pride. Each product came with a story, not just a label. It showed what America could still create if someone was willing to take the risk. But Made Here wasn't stopping at clothing. The vision was much bigger. Eastwood said their current line was just the beginning. They wanted to expand into new categories, still made in America, still focused on worker pride. They didn't want to sell products. They wanted to change how people think about buying them. It was a movement backed by real values. Scott Eastwood never had a normal childhood. Not when your dad is Clint Eastwood. Not when the world already knows your last name before you understand what it means. The most intense moment between them came when Scott was just 16. He made a terrible mistake. He took his 14-year-old sister to a party and left her there alone. He didn't think it was a big deal. Maybe he just wanted to go out and get beer with his friends. But when Clint found out, he didn't hold back. He grabbed Scott, slammed him against the wall, and punched him in the face. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't a warning. It was a violent lesson. Clint grabbed him by the throat and said just one thing: "You don't ever leave your sister at a party ever." That moment stayed with Scott forever. Clint Eastwood came from a different time, a time when parenting meant tough love. Scott later said his dad didn't believe in new age bullshit parenting in their house. You did something wrong. You got punished. That's how it worked. There were no handouts. When Scott asked for $8,000 to buy a truck, Clint didn't even think about it. He just said no. Scott had a job. He was earning money. That was enough. He had to figure the rest out himself, and he did. Clint taught him more than just how to survive. He taught him how to show up on time, how to work hard, how to take life seriously. Scott says that's where his hustler mentality came from. If he wanted something, he had to earn it. One of the biggest decisions in Scott's career came in 2002. Warner Brothers offered him a 3-picture deal. It included a role in the Suicide Squad. It was the kind of offer most actors dream about. Big money, big exposure. But Scott didn't feel good about it. He didn't like the contract. He told his father, "They don't want to pay me real money and there's no script for the next film." Clint didn't try to push him. He just said, "If it feels right, do it. If not, don't." That was it. No pressure, no big speech, just gut instinct. And Scott walked away from the deal. That moment showed something important. Clint wasn't just a father. He was a mentor. He taught Scott that career choices should be about respect and instinct. Not just fame or money, but their relationship wasn't just built on lessons or arguments, it was also built on stories. Now, Clint is 94. He's one of the last living legends of old Hollywood. Scott knows that he tries to get as many stories out of him as he can. Sometimes they're wild stories about Frank Sinatra or old movie sets, stories that seem like they belong in a museum. Clint doesn't tell them often. So when he does, Scott listens carefully. "You're not going to be around forever," he once told his dad, and he meant it. Scott remembers being on the set of Space Cowboys as a kid. He remembers Clint flying a helicopter up the coast of California, with him sitting in the seat beside him. Sometimes Clint would even let him hold the controls. Moments like that weren't just cool. They made Scott see the kind of man. His father really was focused, fearless, and completely in charge of his world. Now Scott's building his own world. His next big film, Regretting You, is based on a best-selling Colleen Hoover novel. It's set to release in theaters on October 24th, 2025. The cast is stacked. Allison Williams, Dave Franco, McKenna, Grace. The story is emotional. A car accident destroys a family and unravels decades of secrets. Hoover herself is executive producing. Scott knows how powerful the Hoover fan base is. He's stepping into a world that could explode if the film hits, but he's not stopping there. In Stolen Girl, he plays Robeson, a man who helps track down a missing child taken to the Middle East. It's based on the true story of Maureen Daba. Kate Beckinsale plays the mother the film shot in Italy and dives deep into international betrayal, war zones, and parental love that never gives up. It's gritty, it's heartbreaking, and it's very real. He's also shooting Lucky Strike, a World War II film set during the Battle of the Bulge. The director is Rod Lurie, the same man behind The Outpost. The story is personal. It's based on a real interview the writer did with a war veteran when he was just 16. It's a survival story told through one soldier's eyes, Colin. Hanks and Anjanu Ellis-Taylor are also starring. Filming starts in Bulgaria this November, and then there's Wind River, the next chapter. It's a sequel to the 2017 hit. Scott joins a powerful cast that includes Martin Sensmeyer and Jason Clarke. The story follows a series of ritualistic murders on a Native American reservation. Scott plays a fish and wildlife tracker brought in to help the FBI. It's dark, it's layered. It dives into tribal politics, justice, and survival in the American wilderness. Filming is done. But the release is still a question mark. Scott Eastwood once said that working in Hollywood felt like being stuck in a circus. He wasn't joking in a 2022 interview. He opened up about how the industry had burned him again and again. By that time, he was 35, and already questioning whether it was worth sticking around for the long haul. "I've been burnt a few times," he said. "I don't know if I want to do this into my 40s. Those weren't just words. His early years were anything but glamorous. He lived in Los Angeles and San Diego juggling jobs like construction work, bartending, and parking cars just to survive. He made about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Shockingly, he earned more mixing drinks than he did acting. There were moments when he came close to quitting. He even considered becoming a firefighter. That wasn't just a passing thought. It was a real backup plan. The emotional toll of chasing roles, combined with the unpredictability of the business, weighed heavily on him. And now, with his late 30s approaching, he's thinking about more than just movies. He doesn't have a family yet, but he wants one, and he's deeply worried about what that life would look like, especially the idea of being away from his kids all the time just to keep working in an unstable business. While Hollywood drained him, something unexpected kept him grounded. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He got into it because of his friend Paul Walker. They met over a decade ago, and Walker introduced him to the sport around 6 to 8 years before his tragic passing. Paul was obsessed with it. He had mats in his home in Hawaii, so he could train anytime. That influence stuck with Eastwood. He started training seriously, and it changed him. He talked about it on Joe Rogan's podcast, calling jiu-jitsu the ultimate humbling. In a place like Hollywood, where everyone's chasing status and validation, rolling on the mat reminded him that ego means nothing. You're gonna choke some people out. People are gonna choke you out. He said it's simple, it's honest, and it breaks the illusion that you're special. That mindset, that calm, and that reality check, he said. It's why the best jiu-jitsu guys are the most grounded people he's ever met.